This is our continuing program, Celebrate Oakmont 125. This month, our program is entitled Down by the Riverside. And it's a look back at the days when Oakmont was a resort town. A lot of people don't realize that this was a very popular resort that a lot of people came to. During the summer, we all go on vacation. And when we go on vacation, we usually leave Oakmont and we head to the water. Whether it be rivers, lakes, or the shore, we always like to go where there's water. Well, 100 years ago, people didn't leave Oakmont, they came to Oakmont to be near the water. In the early 1900s, this was a very popular resort town. And it was known all over the country because of the activities that went on here. The first record we have of water recreation in Oakmont dates back to the year 1878. And on June 21st of that year, a gentleman by the name of Evan Morris of Pittsburgh and Edward Hanlon of Canada met for a 5-mile canoe race on the Allegheny River at what was called the Halton Course. And the Halton Course was a canoe racetrack. And the newspaper said that the starting line was about a half a mile above the Halton station across from the paper mill. And it traveled south for 1 mile, made a bend in the river, and came back to the starting line. So what I could figure is it started up around Halton Station, went down to about Plum Creek, the mouth of Plum Creek, and came back. It was one of the most famous courses in the country. Well, this race was between Edward Morris, as I said, of Pittsburgh, and Edward Hanlon of Canada. And the race was to determine the North American Championship for canoe racing. And I started to do a newspaper search and went on newspaper archives, and I was just amazed at the number of newspapers in the United States and Canada that covered this race. I guess you could call it like what the World Cup soccer is today. That's what this race was. And I found an article that was in a paper from, it was called the Huron Expositor, I think that's how you pronounce it. But this is how they described what went on here in Oakmont. It said, very early, the roads leading to Halton and Harmerville were swarming with wagons and freight vans of every kind, carrying supplies of lager beer, pop, lemonade, fruits, and other refreshments. And in an incredible amount of time, booths, tents, and uncovered enclosures were springing up around the Big Bend on both sides of the river. Wheels of fortune, sweat boards, and all kinds of gambling devices were doing a rival business. As the day advanced, both sides of the river were black with people on the whole length of the course. Many took up the position on the great face of the hill that ran along the northwest side of the river. Over 15,000 people watched the race. Many of the Toronto party bet all the money they had and also threw in their watches and jewelry. Bets for $50 to $1,000 were placed. So this sleepy little hamlet became a gathering place. I mean, a lot was going on here, even though there wasn't much here in Oakmont. Well, the result of the race was the Canadian won, and they were proclaimed North American champions. The scull racing was very popular, and as I said, the Halton course was the premier course in North America. However, by 1900, the races went away. And it wasn't because of a lack of interest. It was because they were taken over by gamblers, partiers. They started fixing the races and general rowdiness. And as a result, the races were suspended, and that was the end of the Halton course. So, as I said, in the late 1800s, the Halton course was known all over the country as the top race course. Even though the races ended, recreation on the river was still very popular. And on July 4th, 1903, a small group of Oakmont residents got together and they formed the Oakmont Boat Club. Their first clubhouse was a dilapidated houseboat on the riverbank. And it's said that they actually had to take turns sleeping on the houseboat because someone had to be there to turn on the bilge pump to pump out the water so it wouldn't sink. But just 1 year later, on July 4th, 1904, they opened their clubhouse. And this is a picture of the Oakmont Yacht Club when it opened in 1904. And you can see by the picture there, you see the old car sitting in front of there, the bicycle, the baby carriage, and the way the people were dressed. This is one of the earliest pictures of the Oakmont Yacht Club. They held their first regatta in 1907 and have held one almost every year since. They're well known for the regattas that they have. And in 1934 and 1935, they actually hosted, it was called the William Randolph Hearst Gold Cup. And it was a motorboat race that was held here. And it was sponsored by William Randolph Hearst, who we all know was the millionaire in broadcasting. And this is another shot here. This is another early picture. And when I look at these pictures, I always like to look and see not only the picture of the yacht club, but what's in the background. And there's a few interesting things there. If you look across the would be Washington Avenue, there's nothing there, and that would eventually be the Oakmont Motorboat Company, but they weren't in there yet. If you look directly behind the yacht club building, you see a big barn sitting there on Washington Avenue. Directly behind, you see that church steeple there? That was the steeple that was on St. Paul's Baptist Church. You know, the little white church on Delaware Avenue. At one time, it had a big steeple that was part of the building. And the other thing that's interesting, if you look up at the top, the crest of the hill there, I would figure that's probably around 8th Street, but you can see there's no houses up there. It looks like it's just a field. So that was before all the homes came into Oakmont. J.T. Anderson was an early leader here in Oakmont. He was a businessman. He helped found the Oakmont National Bank, and he was one of the people that really got Oakmont started. He noticed the success of the Oakmont Yacht Club, so he purchased the property directly across Washington Avenue, and he formed the Oakmont Motorboat Company. He built a building, and he rented boats, canoes, and bathing suits to people who wanted to come out and enjoy the river. He later added a refreshment stand and a restaurant, and he had a fleet of over 600 canoes that he rented out to people. After the invention of the motorboat, he became an authorized dealer for what was called the Mullins motorboat. It was one of the earliest motorboats made. He knew what went on with the races, so he was one of the men that really cleaned up the reputation of the river people here in Oakmont and Verona. He formed the Western Pennsylvania Canoe Association, and with that group, with the Oakmont Yacht Club and the canoe clubs down in Verona, they really monitored and patrolled the river and made it a respectable family recreation. He was responsible for a lot of that. This is a picture of the Oakmont Motorboat Company shortly after it was built. He had a second-story balcony that he eventually used for parties and dances, and they were very popular with the campers that came out here. In 1913, he purchased the Kowalski Motorboat Company from Verona. And if you know about John Kowalski, he was a Verona resident, and he was referred to as the Thomas Edison of the Allegheny Valley. He built a couple of airplanes, and he was also one of the first developers of motorboats. Well, J.T. Anderson bought him out, and they began to build motorboats in this location here. They made their own brand of motorboats, and one of they made speedboats and cabin cruisers, and the largest boat they made was a cabin cruiser, which he named the Emma, and it was capable of carrying 50 people. J.T. Anderson, he owned a half a mile of property along the river in Oakmont here. And so he started to develop camping grounds and build cottages so that when people came out, they had somewhere to stay. In addition to his campgrounds, we started to see other campgrounds develop be established here in Oakmont. At the foot of Pennsylvania Avenue, we had the Heights Camping Ground. We had Morris Campground, which was located up above Halton Road. There was also the Osceola and Chateau Beach were also up on that end of Oakmont. And along the river below Edgewater was the Edgewater Beach. And we all know the factory was there, but along the riverbank, below the factory, there were cottages and camps and also a general store where the campers could buy groceries and things that they need while they were camping here. Some of these tents that they would come out and stay in were nothing but two-person pup tents. Other tents were large tents with wooden floors, carpeting, furniture, and even electricity. A lot of wealthy people from Pittsburgh would come out, and some of them would spend the summers here. The whole family would come out. They would stay in the tent. The husband would commute back and forth to Pittsburgh by way of the train. The wife and children would spend the summers here in Oakmont. They also had a dining tent where they could eat. And this wasn't just a mess tent. This was a very high-class restaurant. I found a menu from one of the dining tents, and the items included roast duck, grilled whitefish, and clam chowder. So it was a very high-end restaurant, and it was all in a tent. But these are a couple of pictures of what the tents, some of the tents, cottages, and campgrounds looked like. This was called the 7W's Summer Camp, and it was a group of people from Pittsburgh who came out and camped together. Here's some more pictures of the group. They're just in front of their tents. This one on the bottom I thought is interesting. If you look, they have a piano there. It's a very fancy piano that I guess they hauled out from Pittsburgh, and they had entertainment in the evening. You can see they all have the same uniforms on. They had a lot of the same dress and the canoes along the river. This is another picture. This is one of the early regattas at the Oakmont Yacht Club, and you can see the crowds. This picture was taken in 1910, and you can see the boats, and there's some motorboats out there, canoes, and all the people at the Oakmont Motorboat Company and the Oakmont Yacht Club. By 1911, there were 3,500 canoes and motorboats registered in the Oakmont and Verona area. This is just another shot. This would be on the river in front of the yacht club looking down the river, and it's just some people out in their canoes. It was the 4th of July because you can see they have their American flags on their canoes. As I said, J.T. Anderson had put a dance hall in the Oakmont Motorboat Clubhouse, and he hosted parties and dances during the summer season. However, it became very popular. So in 1915, he expanded his dance hall, and he renamed it the Willows. He started to bring in bands and invite people who weren't camping. People from Oakmont, Verona started to go down to the dances at the Willows. He then purchased the ground behind the Oakmont Yacht Club, and he built 50 cabins in there, and he called it the Willows Campground. So he started to have a little resort down there at the foot of Washington Avenue. This is a picture of the inside of the Oakmont Motorboat Company. This is a picture of his snack bar, what it looked like. In addition to Oakmont, the 12 Mile Island was also considered a resort area. There used to be a company, Pittsburgh Steamboat Company, and what they did is they leased a portion of 12 Mile Island, and they built a beach to swim. They built a concession stand, a dance pavilion, baseball field, tennis courts, volleyball courts, and a picnic grove. And what they would do, you know how we had the trolley parks around Pittsburgh, like Kennywood and Westview, where they would take people out to the park on the weekends? on the trolley. Well, the Pittsburgh Steamboat Company would bring people out to Crescent Beach on the weekends, and they would spend Saturdays and Sundays at the beach. And this picture is taking on the island. That's the Bessemer train bridge there. That's looking over towards Harmarville, and that was long before the Turnpike Bridge was built. But if you look at the bottom picture here, I like this picture here. That's a steamboat returning to Pittsburgh. It just passed under the Halton Bridge and is going down the river. You know, we see these boats and we always associate those with the Mississippi River, but those did travel up and down the Allegheny River here and went past Oakmont on a number of occasions. Chateau Beach, that was located up near where the Water Authority was. That was owned by, if you've ever heard of the J.J. Gumberg family, they develop a lot of shopping centers and office buildings here in Pittsburgh. That was owned by the Gumberg family. And again, they had a resort, they rented canoes, they had a concession stand. And I like that picture because you can see the Coca-Cola signs. That's an early picture of a business with Coca-Cola. And they were located up there where the waterworks is. This is another picture. This is a stand that was located across the train tracks. On this side of the train tracks, again, up near the Water Authority in Chateau Beach, you could rent a motorboat or canoe at this stand here. And these are, I don't know who the family is, but that's who operated that. This picture here shows you how popular canoeing was back then. You can see the Halton Bridge on the side there, and the island is over there. And you can see the number of canoes that are out there. What's interesting, I don't know if you can see from back there, but everyone, when they went out canoeing, they got dressed up. Today, if you go, you wear shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt. If you see all the men, they're wearing suit coats, white shirts, there's straw caps, and the women are all dressed up because it was a social outing. When you went on the river, you were going out. Sadly, a lot of these people knew nothing about the river. So as a result, every weekend in Oakmont there were drownings. And there was always accidents. People, you know how shaky canoes are to begin with, and people get out there on the river, couldn't control it. One of the reasons they formed the Oakmont Police Department was because of the number of drownings on the weekends, that they had to assist those people that had accidents on the river. But again, this just gives you an idea of how many canoes were out there. Do we have any water skiers here? A couple. Well, anybody that knows anything about water skiing, the Samuelson brothers of Lake City, Minnesota were credited with inventing the sport of water skiing in 1922. However, I found this picture. This is from the Pittsburgh Dispatch, and this is July 1st, 1914. And the paper reported, the boaters out at Oakmont invented a new sport called waterplaning, where they attach a rope to the back of a motorboat and pull a person standing on a wooden plank. So I think we should claim that water skiing was invented here in Oakmont. I mean, this was 7 years before the Samuelson brothers came along. And we should really push that we're the home of water skiing. Oakmont was also home to a lot of seaplanes. This is an older plane, I guess you can tell by looking at it, and you can see the Halton Bridge in the background. But there were a number of seaplanes. There was the Oakmont Seaplane Base, which was located up above Halton Road. And some of you may remember, I remember growing up, there used to be a plane at the foot of Pennsylvania Avenue. And I can remember being at the park and you'd hear him rev up that engine and we'd all run down to the fence and watch him take off, or we'd see him circling and knew he was coming in. But there were quite a few seaplanes here in Oakmont. I don't know what you call this, extreme water skiing? But this was in the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph, and it was taken out here in Oakmont. So I don't know, but if you can't see it, it's not a good quality. But airplane, and you see the gentleman skiing back there. So I don't know how you get started or how you stop, but I hope he wasn't heading towards the Halton Bridge. J.T. Anderson, he had the Oakmont Motorboat Company. He opened a dance hall in there. He named it the Willows. Well, he started to remodel it, started to expand, And in time, the Willows Night Club became one of the most popular venues for big bands in the country. Anytime any band came through Pittsburgh, they played the Willows.
I could show the world how to smile. I could be glad all of the while. I could change the gray clouds to blue if I had you. I could leave the old days behind, leave all my pals, I never mind. I could start my life all anew if I had you.
People like Artie Shaw, Guy Lombardo, Rudy Vallee, Tommy Dorsey, whenever they came through, they all played at the Willows. They installed broadcast equipment in the dance hall, and they would broadcast radio shows nationwide from the Willows here in Oakmont. In addition to the big band, they would host vaudeville shows, Broadway reviews, and they even did opera. They had some opera programs down there. The large dance hall was called the Marine Room, and then they also had a smaller room in the front here where this entrance was, and it was called the Peacock Room. In the early days, it was a gambling parlor. They would gamble in there. But then later on, they turned it into a restaurant. During the summer, constant big bands, big names were coming into Oakmont to play the Willows. There were no hotels here in Oakmont at the time. So when these people would come in, there would really be nowhere for them to stay in town. So what started to happen was a lot of the people who lived on that lower Washington Avenue neighborhood, they would take these performers in and they would stay with them. And the wives would do their laundry, they would have their meals with the family, and if they were here for a week or 2 weeks, they would live with the family. And they developed a lot of friendships. And so if a certain band came in every year, they would stay with the same family. So if you knew Tommy Dorsey was coming in, the trombone player might stay with a certain family every year. And as I said, even after the Willows closed, they maintained friendships with a lot of people here in Oakmont that they had gotten to know when the bands came in. They ran charter buses from downtown Pittsburgh out to the Willows because there were so many people coming out. They would leave the Nixon Theater and they would come out to the Willows. Jim Eaton told me the story that the young boys from Oakmont, teenagers, would go down to the Willows on Friday and Saturday night, and the rich people would drive out in their Cadillacs and their Duesenbergs and their expensive cars, and they would tip the kids from Oakmont to go park their cars. So these young kids would take their car and they may park it up on 6th Street and go get another one, park it on 4th Street, and then when they were ready to leave, they go get their car. So those kids made money, but I just think it's funny, these young kids driving these big expensive cars, but they always looked forward to when there were bands playing in there. This is a picture of the Willows Dance Hall. You can see how big it is. There's the stage here and some type of fountain in the middle there. But this is the main dance hall. This is an ad for the Willows. They opened their summer season during Memorial Day weekend every year. And this is for 1929, opened on Saturday, May 25th with Tracy Brown's Columbia Recording Orchestra. 1928, 1929, the Tracy Brown Orchestra was the house orchestra at the Willows. So they played the entire year there. What's interesting is, actually it's not Tracy Brown. There's one man's last name was Tracy and the other was Brown. So that's how they came up with Tracy Brown. But in 1928, the Tracy Brown Orchestra had the #1 song in the country. It was called Beautiful. So they were a very popular band, and they were here at the Willows for 2 years straight.
A turned up shiny little nose, to me she's mighty like a rose, and everybody knows she's beautiful. Although she's mighty hard to make, she's also mighty good to take. The day that she
This is another ad talking about everything that's going on at the Willows. This was a full-page ad that ran in the Pittsburgh Press. So they were always promoting it. These are a few ads also that ran in the Pittsburgh papers. You can see, you may know some of these, you may not. Paul Whiteman and his orchestra, Kay Kaiser, Jimmy Dorsey. Here we have the grand opening at the Willows in 1937, Artie Shaw. How many people have heard of Kay Kaiser? Kay Kaiser was one of the most popular bands during the 1930s, 40s, and up into the 50s. He also hosted a radio and then television show which was called the College of Musical Knowledge. And from what I understand, it was a zany, comedy-type music show that was very popular. Well, he was scheduled in here May 25th of 1931. He was to open the season that year. A couple of days before the show, his trumpet player quit. And so he was from North Carolina. He really didn't know anyone in Pittsburgh, but he needed a trumpet player. So he happened to know the band director at WVU, West Virginia University. So he called him and he said, "I'm in a jam. I need a trumpet player. Do you have anyone?" And the band director said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. There's a young man here by the name of Merwin Bogue. He's an excellent trumpet player, and he's also a talented actor." So he said, I could send him. So Kay Kaiser said, "I'll wire him money, tell him to meet me at the Willows Night Club in Oakmont." And in his autobiography, Merwin Bogue talked about taking the train from Morgantown, West Virginia, to Oakmont, Pennsylvania, where he got off at the train station and walked down to the Willows Night Club where he met Kay Kaiser. Well, the two of them hit it off, and Kay Kaiser offered him a permanent position in the band. Well, they started to work out some comedy routines, and he took the name Ish Kabibble, and he became a part of Kay Kaiser's band for over 20 years. He also went on to star in 10 movies during the 1940s. So, the next time you're at a cocktail party and you want to impress your host, you can say, "Did you know Ish Kabibble got his break in Oakmont?"
Well, I once said, "Well, shaving is mush." I'm telling you, baby, you're getting a brush.
Hey, Ish, you know what the bug said to the windshield?
Yeah, that's me all over.
Yeah, that's me all over.
This is a picture of Rudy Vallee at the Willows. And I found articles in the Pittsburgh Press that the mayor was concerned about controlling the crowds when he got to Pittsburgh, because all the young women were crazy about him, and they were afraid they were going to mob him when he came into Pittsburgh. There was also a comment by the Oakmont police chief, Charles Helwig, that he would ensure there were proper security for Rudy Vallee when he got to Oakmont. And this is a picture of him in the Willows Chris Craft boat there. And the two gentlemen in the back are the owners by the name of Tusi and Conforti. And I think the guy driving is Mr. Winkleman. And he was the general manager of the Willows. I thought this was interesting. This was an ad in the paper. It says, "Do you want a thrill? Enjoy a zippy, exhilarating ride in a Chris Craft speedboat at the Willows." What they did is they had two Chris Craft motorboats. They had a speedster, they called it, runabout, and they had a cabin cruiser. And both of these boats were equipped with these huge engines. And they said that they were able to achieve speeds of between 45 and 50 miles per hour. And what they would do on Friday and Saturday nights when people would come out to the Willows, they would offer boat rides. And you could go down at night, and they would take you up and down the river. Usually ran from the Halton Bridge down to about Highland Park, this side of the dam and back up. But what's interesting is, how many people know Jim Eaton? Jim's, I think, 95, 96 years old. Jim was one of the captains of these boats, and he used to take people out for rides. He and his father-in-law owned the boats, and his brother-in-laws and his father-in-laws would take people. And I found this ad and I gave it to him, and he looked at that and he said, "Oh, I remember that boat well." So. all during the 30s, even though the country was experiencing a depression, the Willows was booming. I mean, big bands were coming in. The people who had money were coming out. Very popular, very busy. But it all came to an end on December 7th, 1941, with the outbreak of World War II. And that's when the happy times ended. Number one, the young men were drafted to serve in the war. The other thing that caused the end of all these camps and things were the factories along the river had to expand to meet the war effort. So you had Edgewater expanded, and those camps along the river were eliminated. Scaife, when they expanded, a lot of the Willows campground went away. Up above the river, you had Chateau Beach and Osceola. Thompson Paint Company, I think it was U.S. Egyptian, they expanded, and when they did, those were all torn down. So that was really what brought about the end of all the camping and things that went on in Oakmont here. The one that did survive was the Morris Campground. And there were no industries right in that area. However, during the war, as I said, people weren't really in the celebrating and mood. So you started to see those people fall away, and they started to sell those camps and cottages as permanent residents. And you saw people move into them as permanent residents of Oakmont. The Willows Night Club, they even had converted their basement into a machine shop, and they made machine products for World War II in the basement of the nightclub. In 1946, the nightclub closed. It was sold. A company by the name of Motorboat Sales and Service Company purchased it, and they tore down a part of the building. The other part was used as a marina, and that was really the end of the Willows Nightclub. This shows the size of the Willows at its heyday. Up on the end there, they had the Peacock Room, you had your restaurant, you had your marine room. So it was a whole complex along the river there. Those parts are all gone. The Peacock Room is still standing. That's the, was it Riverside Landing for the Greek church, their banquet hall? That's the only part that's still a part of that original building. After they turned it into a marina, that became a restaurant. I think it was called the Harbor House. Yeah, that was the Harbor House restaurant. And then a nightclub during the 80s. But yeah, this gives you an idea of how big the Willows nightclub was. But the other big draw in Oakmont was the Willows Pool. And J.T. Anderson, as I said, he owned the Willows nightclub. In 1925, he decided he would build a swimming pool. And he built a swimming pool at a cost of $250,000. It measured 335 feet in length and 225 feet wide. And it basically extended from Washington to Delaware Avenue. He named his new pool the Willows Pool. And when he opened it in 1925, for the grand opening, he had Johnny Weissmuller, if you know who Tarzan. He came in, and he was the MC at the grand opening of the Willows Pool. It was so large that they held canoe races in the pool. They also hosted the Miss Pittsburgh beauty pageant there for a number of years, and they also had swimming and diving competitions there. And that picture, we have it enlarged down at the History Center. And almost everybody that comes in, when they see that picture, right away they say, I remember swimming at the Willows. So it evokes a lot of memories. But these are a couple of shots from the Willows Pool. And this is, the top one is looking across the pool. And this would be standing on the riverside looking up. And you can see there are still some of the Willows cottages there. The camps are still up there on the hill. And again, you can see the canoes. They're having a canoe race in there. And another picture of people canoeing in there. This is the Miss Pittsburgh beauty pageant. And again, look at the crowds in the bleachers. I mean, you can see how many people came out for this. This is another picture just to show you the size of the pool. People have told me about the platforms they had in the middle. You can see the platform, and you can see how many people are standing out on that. And again, that's a canoe race. If you can see the canoe there, they're racing through the canoes. This picture here, again, shows you another view of the pool. There you can see the cottages. You get a better look at the cottages above the pool. This would be on the Washington Avenue side looking towards Delaware Avenue. We don't know what's going on here, but the only thing we can see is all attention is directed at that gentleman standing there with the bow tie on. So he must be somebody famous because everybody's looking at him. You see, when people came out to the Willows, when they weren't swimming, they were all dressed. Coats, ties, hats, women in long dresses. It was a day out when you went out to the Willows. And again, this just gives you an idea of how big the pool was. This is an aerial shot. You can see it's pretty much a whole city block. In 1933, the pool experienced financial problems. The bank foreclosed on it and the pool closed. It was very popular with the people of Oakmont, so the borough of Oakmont bought the pool for $30,000 and they operated it as a borough entity. It opened up again in the summer of 1934, and I found articles from the old advanced leaders that said there were record crowds. 3,000 people on a weekend had come out to swim at the pool. Well, they hired a gentleman by the name of Charles Gerding to manage the pool. And this is a picture of him. The patrons referred to him as Pop Gerding. That's what everybody called him. Pop Gerding was probably one of the earliest. You know how we have our PR specialists and spin doctors and things like that? He was a genius at public relations and promotions. He had worked with a lot of movie stars, silent movie stars, stage actors as an agent. He was also in promotions, advertising, so he was an excellent promoter. And what he did, he had a gimmick at the Willows Pool, is he would send out free memberships to famous people all over the world. And they would receive a letter with the pool pass and tell them, congratulations, you're now a member of the Willows Pool. Feel free to visit anytime. It will cost you nothing to swim at our pool. Well, a lot of these people would send him letters thanking him for the free membership. And what he did, he took all those letters and he framed them and he put them on the wall of his office. And they said his whole wall was filled with letters from all these celebrities. And among the people that were members of the Willows Pool here in Oakmont, General Douglas MacArthur, J. Edgar Hoover, Bob Hope, Babe Ruth, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and I still can't figure this out, Chinese Premier Chiang Kai-shek was a member of the Willows here in Oakmont. I don't know if he ever came, but he did have swimming privileges. As I said, he knew all these famous people throughout the world, but he also knew all the kids who swam at the Willows on a regular basis. And I see a few people shaking their head. How many people remember Pop Gerding? There you go. And I've heard stories that he had a megaphone, and they said he would go out there and say, Billy Smith, your mother called. It's time for dinner. Go home. Or, you know, Johnny, your mother called. She needs you to stop and pick up a loaf of bread on your way home, you know. So he was, you know, the biggest stars and the neighborhood kids. He knew everybody and knew them by name. What's amazing is Pop Gerding lost his eyesight while he was manager of the pool, and he ran the pool. He was blind, he couldn't see, and he ran the pool. And everybody loved Pop Gerding. He finally retired, I think, in 1956, when he retired. And he was also a huge promoter of Oakmont. He loved the pool, but he loved Oakmont just as much. So he was a driving force behind the Willows and the town of Oakmont. This is a picture I'm sure a lot of you remember. This is the entrance to the Willows. This is where the Oakmont Landing is now. This would be Washington Avenue, looking across at the entrance there. You can see in the back there that roof, that's the Oakmont Yacht Club. So that gives you an idea of where the entrance to the pool was. Kept it until the mid-50s. At that point, they sold it to private owners who ran the pool for another 20 years. These pictures came into the History Center. a gentleman by the name of Jeff Cronin. He and his friends took these pictures. That's Jeff in the pool. I guess he has the distinction of being the last swimmer at the Willows pool. That was the day it closed, and you can see he's the only one in the pool. And then these other pictures they took of the pool being demolished. As I said, 73 it was torn out, and then they built the Oakmont Landing apartment complex on the spot. The riverbank along Oakmont is always revolving and changing. The swimming pool, the dance hall, the cottages, the tents gave way to the factories who took over the riverfront. Today, the factories are gone and the residents of Oakmont are taking back the riverfront. So it's always changing, evolving. It's now used as recreation once again, although in a different form of recreation. We have walking trails, jogging trails, and we see the canoes coming back, the scull teams riding up from Verona. So through the years, it's always changed, but it's always been a vibrant part of Oakmont. Thank you.
Thank you.